How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Emerald City Hockey Postgame Live. RJ, I don't even how do we even start this one, right? Columbus wins it 6-2. The Kraken just, they have another great opportunity to come out, play well, kick off a good road trip. The Kraken broadcast was very much talking about the 16 games left before the Four Nations tournament. You got to be thinking that Dan Bilesma, the rest of the coaching staff, was looking at this window as an opportunity to maybe turn things around, get back into it a little bit, especially because, look, the strength of competition for this stretch that the Kraken are in right now is not great. However, the Kraken have found a way to just, I don't know, just continue to gain draft position.
Right. I think they've made it clear kind of where they're at this season. And look, the broadcast, if you watch the pregame show for the Kraken, right, they were talking about, as you mentioned, that stretch of 16 games before the Four Nations break that you have to kind of get back in it and show that, we don't want to be a basement dwelling team. We want to make a real run at this thing. I don't think the team really wants to do that. The players on the ice, right? We've talked about it so many times. Is it the coaching? Is it the players? What is it, right? At the end of the day, it comes down to the players on the ice, and we've just seen time and time again, they just cannot get that focus together to play for 60 minutes and get these wins. And I think, if we hadn't already realized it, right? Yeah. They're telling us everything we need to know.
Right. That second period was, that was the most it feels like we've ever seen this team really just decide not to show up for a while, because that was defensively. And this is, Brandon Montour, Jamie Alexiak. It's not even like it's, your bottom pairing here, but defensively, both the defenders as well as the forward groups just decided, we're just going to allow guys to find time and space on the interior. We're not going to cover any passing lanes. We're just going to kind of stand around. We're going to let them get really close to us, like on the Kent Johnson goal, and then just kind of fling our stick out there instead of going for a proper poke check. They just did not look like they were in it at all. And I don't think that there's really any excuse for that. This was a potentially very winnable game for you if you're the Kraken. And at the very least, if you're not going to win it, you got to at least make it look good. And this team did not make it look good tonight at all. And that's got to be a real problem. And I know there's our first super chat there from Russ with expectations reset. And we've been talking about that, RJ. But right now, just after watching, especially that second period, I'm at the point where it's yes, reset expectations, reset everything. We were talking, just scratch Chandler Stevenson and Andre Burakovsky. Why not? They're not necessarily adding anything to you. Chandler Stevenson's able to pick up a primary assist on Tolvanen's second goal and pad that number there. But for a large portion of this game, we were looking at it on Money Puck, 10% expected goal share again. And this is not the first time that the pair of them have been sub 15%. It feels like that's more often than not with them. I don't know, RJ. I'm ready to just be truly give this to Maddie's line, give this to Shane's line. Shane looked good again tonight, and just get those other guys just completely out of the equation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that completely. We've talked about it kind of in the lead up, right? Knowing that the Kraken face long odds this season, right? Talking about at a certain point, a decision has to be made that, okay, we're going to look toward the future. This season is lost. Let's start making decisions based on the long term. And I think the guys are telling you the time is now to do that. Mm-hmm. I was okay on holding off on that for a little bit because you have literally half a season to go going into this game, right? I wasn't ready to go there yet. I didn't want to go there yet. But I think the guys are just telling you, right? You got to go there. And that means scratching a Chandler Stevens. That means scratching an Andre Burakovsky. It means giving Shane Wright more than 16 minutes of ice time as I try and look up what his ice time final total was in this game. I think you're at the point where you need to start making those changes. It's just simple as that because this team just looks checked out.
Right. And as far as resetting expectations, I'm sure in one of these next couple games against either Buffalo or Detroit, the team is going to come out and they're going to do something and they're going to win a game, and they might even win it big because guess what? They're playing against teams that they're competing with for top 5 draft picks. So obviously they are going to be playing not good teams, and there is still talented players on this Kraken roster, but it really feels like this is a team that is just not going to be able to salvage this season. Right? Not to the level that everybody's going to want from them. And I mean that both from our kind of fan perspective, but also internally. I can't imagine that they're going to be able to salvage this in any sort of way that's going to really, put them in a spot where come the off season, come exit interviews, people are going to walk away with any sort of good feeling towards the future, present, any of it. And that's just a big problem for them after, last year was a very similar case.
Right. Now, with all that, I want to go on to something a little bit lighter here while we have the opportunity. I want to get to this next super chat from El Bell. Happy wedding eve, RJ. Looking forward to the pre-wedding live chat. Sure as hell sounds better than a post-game live chat after that mess. Thank you so much, El Bell. And thank you so much to everybody in chat here that I see with the congrats messages. That's very nice from all of you. I see the next super chat from Jenna with the congratulations as well. I mean, thank you so much. And I'm glad, it's cool to be able to do this, even though my wedding is tomorrow. It's fun to be able to kind of hang out with everybody. And of course, that's why Dylan and I are not in the usual setting. We are at a hotel room in San Ramon, California, as we get ready for my wedding. And that's the lighting I see a little bit. I'm blending in with the door.
Yes.
I know this is probably just, you'll say this is my normal complexion, and you're not entirely wrong, but I don't know that it fully would blend in with the totally white door normally there. But that's kind of where we're at, I think.
It is pretty funny. I wasn't going to say anything, but yes, I will.
I'll beat you to it there.
I will see it. And Trish as well with the super chat. Well, that sucked, Lowell, but here's a super chat for a super wedding. Yeah, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And yeah, this wasn't exactly the the big bachelor party post game live we were thinking we would have for this. Going up against the Columbus Blue Jackets, thought we were going to get a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I just don't entirely know where you go from here if you are the team, right? Dan Bilesma in this one, right? During that second period where the team really looks like they're giving up, calls a timeout, lays into guys in a way that's pretty un-Dan Bilesma-like. We haven't really seen him kind of go off like that in a while. Very well deserved. I'm kind of shocked it took him 42 games to get to that point with this group. But I really wonder, because it didn't seem to make any sort of impact in this game. I'm really wondering, what left can this organization do, right? We talk about, benching or scratching Chandler Stevenson and an Andre Burakovsky. I can't imagine that they will, just because, that's a hell of an indictment on Ron Francis of the job he's done as general manager. But it's just one of those things where I'm really trying to think of the more extreme levers that the organization can pull at this point, and I don't know that they even have any of those left. I don't know that they'll actually do anything.
No, and not really with the aim of kind of saving the season, right? You can trade away a key player. You could trade a Yanni Gord. You could trade a Brandon Tanev, but that's just something that would be done at the deadline anyway. You could trade like a Bjorkstrand. I guess that's the next lever that you could pull, but it doesn't really help you salvage this season, right? It's just kind of a message sent to everybody. And I see DJ Singleton ask about, would you look to bring in a David Carl or some other coach at the end of the season? Could that lead to a revolving door of coaches? I mean, with the coaching thing for David Carl, I don't even know how you set this up to be a situation where you can attract the coach like that. He's got options.
Right. Yeah. Anybody who's going to have the ability to go out there and choose their job, you're not going to get, because I don't know why any coach would choose this job. And I do think that it is kind of a situation where if you do move on from Coach Dan Bilesma, you are going to, at least in the short term, have a revolving door there, because one, it's not a super attractive fit for a lot of guys or situation, because of how this team is managed as far as the cap situation, the roster that you're going to be dealt, the fact that it's not easy to kind of flip and churn over a lot of the personnel on this roster. This is going to be a team that is not going to be easily fixed and gotten back to the playoffs. You're not going to be able to have success with them in the short term. And generally when we see teams like that, RJ, whoever ends up coaching them, whether it's Dan Bilesma for the future or they bring somebody else in over this offseason, that's a stopgap coach. We need to wait out some of these contracts. We need time to work young guys into the lineup and get them ready to go. And then we'll attract a good coach once we have this bigger group of young players at the NHL level that have already proven that they can be NHLers, but they're ready to take that next step. I think there's a very real possibility that, yes, if you just completely clean house this offseason, you fire Ron Francis, new GM wants to hire their own coach, all of that kind of stuff, that you'll see Dave Haxtell last year, Dan Bylsma this year, maybe a new coach for the next 2 years, and then a fourth coach in 5 years after that. Like, I do think that just because of the core group of players and how they have performed, as well as the roster construction that involves them, you are looking at one of those kind of worst case scenarios from a coaching standpoint of a team that's just not going to be competitive and a job situation where you're not going to be hiring somebody for the long term, because nobody that you're going to want for the long term is going to want that job.
Yeah, that's the way that it usually goes with something like this. I guess, the alternative is maybe like you look at San Jose's situation. They had a little bit more promising as far as the young pieces, but you bring in a guy like, Warsofsky's really young, and just it gives them an opportunity at being an NHL coach that's just so hard to pass up, right? If you ever get that chance, that's the other way they could go with it. But, we're still a little ways out from that, as we probably talked. But, if Francis goes, generally when there's a new GM, if there are changes from the top, it means the coaching staff goes as well. So that's just kind of usually how it works. Back to the lighter note a little bit. I see the super chats here from Christian. Congrats on the wedding, RJ. And Sean, we need wedding pics. I will definitely share some wedding pics for sure. We'll be all dressed up nice in our suits and everything. That'll
look
be good.
Like a real post game.
yeah, exactly. It'll look like a real post game. It'll be great. But thank you so much, Christian there and Sean, for the super chats. And really, again, just appreciate all the congrats messages from everybody. That's so nice. And we have another one here from Edward with the super chat. Petition to abolish the second period. And more importantly, congratulations, RJ. Well, first off, thank you, Edward. As far as abolishing the second period, the Kraken have had some rough second periods in this one. I mean, it looked like they were trying to abolish the second period in this game.
I mean, it's a weird one, because I generally look at the second period as like, that's your period where you can really try to flip the script. If you're going to be the underdog team, if you're going to be the team that needs to come into a game and get a win, that's your opportunity to do it, right? Try to take advantage of the fact that the other team has the long change, right? I know you have it too, and it is hard if you are the underdog to try to do that. But I think the second period offers a lot of opportunities for you. Generally, you have a feel for what the refs are going to call after the first period. So you know what you can get away with, or what what to maybe sell a little bit if the other team starts doing it to you. You have the long change that you can try to exploit if possible. I think there's a lot of benefits of the second period. It's just that this team is not really a team capable of utilizing any of them. And it's just tough to see, because if this team is going to be a team that can't really establish something in the first period, you want them to kind of be able to flip that script for the second period, try to get something positive going. But, this is a team that came out, dominated shots on goal in the first 10 minutes of the game. They finally started on time, but they didn't get any goals from it. They weren't able to score. They were able to respond when Columbus scores their first goal in the first period, and you're able to get that response goal, and you're able to stay in the game and keep some positive momentum there. But then you allow another goal to Columbus, right? That is, again, just soft, bad defensive play. Columbus is able to take a lead again, and then you draw the penalty. You enter the second period on a power play, but again, because your special teams and your power play is so brutal, it kind of like wipes away any momentum you could have built up over the intermission. I don't know. There's so many problems with this team, and so few answers that seem to ever work for them.
Right. And the problems, again, they just kind of keep adding up. And it almost gave me the feel like I felt that so many times before the season, right in the first period, they were doing a good job possession wise. They were dominating at stretches early on, but when they don't take advantage of that and put themselves on the front foot, you notice those defensive miscues start to sneak in. Mm-hmm. And we saw it before the first Columbus goal, even, right? On the first Corrali chance before the Corrali goal, there was a cross ice pass that got across, and I think Grubauer made a big save on that. There was Werenski able to just kind of cut to the net really unguarded. And so you could see those things start to add up and start to happen before Corrali ends up being unmarked net front to get that first goal. And even when things got really bad in the game, right? When you 3-1, 4-1, I put out a tweet, right? Just saying, and it just came from a text from you really about the Kraken were really falling apart at that point. And they're just defensive misreads all over the D zone. And they were lucky they weren't down multiple goals. And it's like you see it coming, right? In real time before it happens. And this stuff happens. I mean, Dylan, like at that point, I mean, would you, if you're Dan Biles, maybe think of like calling a timeout, even before you're scored on. I mean, I think we've only seen him call timeouts after they've actually been scored on. And even then it feels like he's being more proactive than say a Dave Hackstall was with the timeouts. Right. But I don't know, maybe that's something to consider.
Look, given the expectations with this team, as far as the big moves they made this offseason, given the expectations, if you're the general manager or the coach going into this situation where you are, it's a little playoffs or bust, right? Like, or at least that's the kind of atmosphere that you were trying to set up at the beginning of the year. I don't understand. And this is one of the few areas where I will criticize what Coach Dan Bylsma has been doing. I don't understand why you're not using timeout every game at some point, right? Like, obviously I get it. You want to make sure that, if there's an opportunity to challenge a goal and get something off the board for the other team, you need to keep it around for that.
You don't, it doesn't.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. You don't even need that. To just use it, right? Like, how many times have we watched this team actively start falling apart, or we can sense that momentum is changing? You can read it in the Discord chat. Everybody is getting the sense that, like, oh, okay, here we go again. Just use the timeout. Or how many times have we seen coaches like John Cooper come into Seattle? His team starts off the game not doing great, calls a timeout, or at least utilizes the TV timeout, and then everything changes for them. The problem is, and I guess this is one reason why maybe Dan hasn't done it, is you have situations like today where Dan does it and it does not seem to have any effect on the players. I've never seen a team like that. I've never seen a hockey team that just doesn't respond the way this team just doesn't seem to respond to messaging from a coaching staff. And again, we're into 2 coaching staffs. We're into different situations, whether it's the timeout mid-game, it's intermission changes, right? Because we're getting these assistant coach interviews. We know that they're talking about this stuff. Or it's situations like a couple weeks ago where it's, all day long, you're at morning skate and through practice the previous day, you're talking about we got to stop turnovers. And then you go out there and you have your worst game ever as far as turning the puck over. I just don't understand what about this group. It just seems like kind of fundamentally broken when it comes to responding to messaging of any kind.
Yeah, and that's where I want to tie this into the super chat from JTB Hockey here. Hindsight being 2020, I would love to see if this team would have responded differently if Seattle hired Todd McClellan instead of Dan. Of course, there's no way we can know for sure. We don't have the ability to see into alternate futures like that. But I can't imagine that they would have. They've already had 2 different head coaches, very different head coaches, right? Stylistically, with everything, the way they deliver messages, what type of play has consequences and what doesn't. And nothing just seems to work. So I don't know, maybe there is some guy out there would have that perfect blend to get the team to respond. But given what we've seen, I just don't believe that's the case.
You don't think the 1-1-3 or the 1-3-1 was going to change everything, RJ, for you?
Yeah, I mean, if they're checked out playing this system and this style, man, I can't imagine having to play.
I bet they are a better team. I bet they have more points in the standings, though, just because some of these games would have just turned into like a terrible muck and it would have been miserable. But I bet that the Kraken Hockey Network would have fewer viewership.
Yeah,
but the team would be better, but there would be less fans.
Yeah, I think, and especially look at that point, if you're playing the 1-3-1 and just boring games all around, and you're still not winning enough games,
because they still wouldn't be a playoff team.
No. So at that point, you've kind of already failed. That's one of the reasons I was against hiring him as a coach. Is like, look, unless you have a lot of success, unless you make like the second round of the playoffs or beyond, playing that style of game, you're not going to attract new fans. So, and then another super chat here from Mark Cast. Congrats on the wedding, RJ. Thank you so much. And again, just appreciate all the messages from everybody. It is a fun way, to spend the night before my wedding. This is my little bachelor party here. So appreciate everyone being here for it. And as I saw my fiance in chat. So that's we see we're having a nice clean bachelor party. No drinking, nothing.
No shenanigans
whatsoever. So we're all good.
Not quite 7:00 yet, but it's fine. Yeah, and you saw people in chat kind of more towards the bottom there, right, talking about Chandler Stevenson and the situation there. I mean, look, this is the kind of stuff where I feel very comfortable now, just kind of like talking about it. And it's one where I know I've talked before about kind of the team's payroll as a whole, but I really feel like just watching Chandler Stevenson play kind of night in, night out, and how brutal all the analytics are and how serious we know this organization takes analytics and the ownership group's willingness to invest in analytics. I really am I'm very much struggling, RJ, to see a future in which Ron Francis remains general manager of this team, come the end of this year.
Right. And I think you phrased it really well. Was it last post game when you just talked about looking at it, not just in terms of the Kraken or the NHL, but really in any sport? How often does a team have a top 3 payroll in the league, get bottom 5 results, and the GM keeps his job? And it's not something that he just inherited or whatever. He's had 4 years on the job and sets up this kind of situation. I don't know how it ends any differently than that, right? Sports are such a results driven business. And when you have these kind of results for that kind of money that's being spent, and especially long term, right? This wasn't some short term kind of go for it this year. This wasn't things like we talked about in the offseason, like bring in a Patrick Laine for 2 years, 2 years left on his deal, and it's big money. But if it doesn't work out, okay, 2 years from now, you can scrap the contract. These are long term investments now that have gone very, very bad. And I see people in chat talking about, what would it take to get rid of Stevenson in that contract, and talking about attaching a first. It would take a whole lot more than that to get rid of him. And it's just at this point, right? You cited the stat from Natural Stat Trick, right? Where by a lot of metrics, he is the worst forward in the NHL. I don't know what you do about that. I think you actually seriously, and I will look at this a little bit in the Armchair GM stream later this month, look at is a buyout worth it? And I would almost never say that for a deal with six years left on it. But I think we actually have to start looking at what that would look like, and does it make sense for the Kraken? Of course, if that were to happen, it would be another GM doing it. There's especially no way a GM who signs that contract would be able to then buy it out a year later. That just doesn't ever happen. So, but I'm kind of at that point with Stevenson. I think we can just be candid about it and talk about it for what it is, right? I don't think we need to sugarcoat anything.
No, and it's tough too, because it's, when looking at Ron Francis, you have a situation where obviously there's like the Stevenson signing and kind of the results that have come from that. We, like you just talked about, right? Been talking about the payroll versus the overall results and kind of how unsurvivable that is. But I think it also, if you're ownership, you have to look at it and say, do we want to enter another free agency cycle with somebody who has signed the Philip Grubauer contract, the Andre Burakovsky contract, the Chandler Stevenson contract, where he's committed huge dollars to guys that have been our worst performers, right? Who actively cost us games the most. And I got to think that, again, that's just like another one of those things that if you're an ownership group and you're looking at that situation and you've got to make a decision before July 1st and free agency opens, I don't know that I would, if I was in that situation, be able to pull that trigger and keep that person around. And, I think there's a lot of great things that Ron Francis has done. I just think that the way he has constructed this roster has just built them into a hole, built them into a corner, whatever it is you want to call it, that they just cannot get out of with a lot of these free agent decisions that he's made.
Exactly. And I wouldn't trust him, especially knowing that, again, he's probably, look, if he's not already let go at the end of this year, certainly if next year goes poorly, then he would be. And so he knows that. And I think that's part of the reason that you got these signings like you had this offseason, because it's very Ron Francis like, right? This is something that he's never done before. It was very uncharacteristic for him. And I said it at the time, I'll say it again. I think it was really just born out of desperation. And I don't think you want a GM who's as desperate as Francis was this past offseason, certainly not as desperate as he would be with another offseason in charge. And as DJ Singleton pointing out, just so everybody kind of get the idea of it, Stevenson buyout would cost the Kraken $2 million in cap space for the next 12 years. So that's roughly what it looks like.
I mean, it sounds crazy, but like looking at that, I'm kind of like, it's not so bad, actually.
No, compared to,
like the cap's going to keep going up and stuff. At some point, that'll be less than 2% of the salary cap.
Inflation helps you there, I guess.
Still not a good situation, though. No. Yeah. Obviously, a lot of chat to kind of get through. A lot of people just like, what is that? What's going on? Like, what can we do here? And it's tough, right? Because this is another kind of example game where the Kraken come out and they fix one of their problems, only then to have one of the other problems kind of spring back up. And this was in this one, RJ, unlike so many of those games during this most recent homestand, they come out and they are the team that started the game on time, right? 6-7 shots on goal before Columbus is able to get one of their own. Kraken are absolutely dominating things. You look at the end of the second period, the Kraken had higher team expected goal share than Columbus did because of how much the Kraken dominated things early. It's just because they're not able to get a goal in that first 10 minutes when they're truly dominating, that it just kind of leaves that window of opportunity open for Columbus to get back in the game, for them to find their game. Felt very similar to 2 homestands ago, where it was Tampa Bay, Boston, whatever, all those teams that were, Kraken started out stronger then, but because they weren't able to truly take advantage and capitalize on that strong start, just allows those other teams to come in and really start building momentum. If you're able to get that, an opening goal or two there and really put Columbus where they have to come back from a goal, a goal deficit, a 2-goal deficit, it just makes everything so much harder for them from a momentum standpoint. And instead, by letting them survive that, you just let them build momentum and just kind of take that in a sport where momentum means so much. Kraken just have to find a way for these games where they start on time to actually be able to score.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this a lot in the past, right? Does it come down to, I think it's like kind of all of the above, right? Lack of finishers, but also not going to the right areas. I know Edzo was really on Berkey early on in the game for a chance where he had to stop at the net and be there for a Vince Dunn shot, but he skated right by and didn't want to go there. That's something we see often with this forward group. But it's those little things that teams do to get to those areas. I mean, look at the first Columbus goal, right? Where they didn't have a good start to this game, but when they get on the board, you had Sean Corrali going in there, forechecking really hard against Jamie Alexiak and wins a physical battle against the 6'7" Alexiak, right? He does that, gets it to the point, and you know where he goes immediately after? Right to the front of the net. And the Kraken, I mean, he had 2 defensemen go to the other guy, so he's kind of unmarked, but he knows he could get cross-checked there. He knows he could get shoved out of the way. He knows he could take a puck to the face, right? It's a tough area to go, but he goes there and he gets rewarded for the goal. So you see that with other teams doing it. Like Columbus, I really don't think they have more talent than the Kraken on their roster.
Especially because they're missing so many guys.
Right. They're missing so many guys. Sean Monahan was out for this game, right? They have injury problems, it feels like, every year. But as Viren's pointing out, right, they are in a playoff spot. They're not chasing the number 1 pick like they were last year, like a lot of people thought they would be this year. But it's because they do those right things, because they have those habits. And you know what? Because they've done it consistently enough. Right. That's the key. I mean, consistency has been brought up so much.
And they get the young guys to do it. Look at the goal that Luca Belize scores, right? Yeah. Like, he is net front. He is there getting a rebound or kind of having the rebound go off of him to go in and get a goal. That's a guy, I mean, I think that was his first game this year at the NHL level.
Second NHL game ever, I think.
Right.
Second
and
goal.
He's doing that.
And you know who's right there on his back? Again, it's Jamie Alexiak. And I'm not trying to even throw Alexiak under the bus here. I would like him to be more physical and maybe punish a guy like that for going there. But Del Bel Belou's right. No, he knows there's a 6'7" guy here right behind me that I'm going to try and sneak past. And he can cross-check me in the back or in the arm or whatever. They're probably not going to call anything, and that's going to hurt. Right. That's really going to hurt. I'm in my second game. But he goes there without hesitation. He makes a play because it's what you do.
Yeah. No, so, the Kraken just struggle with that stuff. It's just, it's really tough. And yes, they are a team that is in playoff position. They are a team that is being coached really well right now. And again, their players are responding to the coaching that they are getting. They are following those lessons, and they're able to be in a spot. The Eastern Conference isn't great this year. They're able to kind of do that, but it's still one where the Kraken should make the game look better, right? Like I said, it doesn't even have to be a win. You at least got to make the game look close. And the Kraken are really struggling to do that right now against teams that have massive injury issues, that are having multiple guys playing their first game this season, right? Like Denton Matejchuk playing his first NHL game. Like, it's crazy to me that the Kraken are kind of struggling the way that they're struggling against some of these groups and against some of these players, some of these individual game within a game matchups. Right? Like, this was one where you should be able to exploit those matchups against those young players that are very inexperienced at the NHL level. And instead, they exploited the matchups against you. Against a defensive pairing that's making over $10 million against the cap. Yeah. Like, that's what Columbus did tonight, right? Like, that is an issue for you. And that's just like kind of like a fundamental institutional issue that the Kraken need to figure out in that locker room. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a culture thing as much as it is anything else. And then I just saw it from Lindsay. Okay, win or lose, can we all agree that Del Bel Belou's is one of the coolest names in hockey? It Definitely. Is. And I'm glad to see him have success. I loved him in junior, loved him his draft year and everything. And his parents were in the arena tonight, got to see him score. And I thought And also Denton Matejchuk's parents were
Yeah.
in the arena and got to see him score. And I thought it was really cool. I was watching the Blue Jackets, broadcast for a big part of this. They went down into the crowd and just like interviewed them.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like
I love
just
that.
the parents, just like, what was it like to watch him score at the NHL level, right? And they did that twice, and I was like, wow, that's something that more teams I think should do as part of their broadcast, because they'll always do the cutaway to the parents, show the reaction, show that they're in the building before anything happens, show the reaction once something happens. I've never seen them just like walk down and sit down next to them in the crowd and be like, talk me through your emotions when you just watch that really, most special moment happen.
That is so great. So, I mean, so much better than kind of just the average, player interview that you get. And I know that event doesn't happen all the time, right, with the parents, but if you got it there, take advantage of it. Great job on the Columbus TV crew there. And then Schultz with the super chat asking, is Tovey immune to Stevenson? And then Hayden in for ? So that is one little tiny silver lining, is that you had the Stevenson, Burakovsky, and Tolvanen line actually put up pretty good numbers in this game. I would certainly give it a try next game, because why the heck not, right? But I'm looking at the final numbers from that. I mean, 2:20 time on ice. 2 minutes, 20 seconds. And the shots on goal, 3-0 in their favor. Shot attempts, 6-0 in their favor, and 100% expected goal share. So,
I think try it, see what happens. I mean, if you can find somebody who's going to have some sort of positive chemistry with Stevenson and Andre Burakovsky, that's obviously going to be huge for you. We'll see, right? I mean, that did, all those minutes came when the game was out of hand, right? I don't know that it's, Columbus was necessarily trying the hardest, because the game was 5-1 at that point, late into the third period. So I think it's something worth exploring, but I'm not ready to sign off on it completely yet.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of the stage we're at. Explore it, because there's some good results. It's the only time you've really seen good results there. But I don't know that it'll work long term, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And then a big super chat here from Duthan. Congratulations, RJ. I hope you have a wonderful day tomorrow. Thank you so much, Duthan. Again, really appreciate it. All the kind words and everything. And I will be thinking about this too, just how nice the community was, right? Day before my wedding, and then also the day after the Kraken have a game, and the day after that they have a game. So I'll see you all there for post game as well. I'll try and make it as much as I can. Still lots of events around it, but I'll definitely try and hop on for those.
Yeah. Going back to the previous super chat too, John Hayden coming into the lineup.
That's right.
I mean, John Hayden, I do think he should probably be in this lineup, just because, look, he is a player who will go to the net front. He is going to do a lot of the stuff that the Kraken players are not going to do. And anytime they can work players like that into the lineup who are going to do those things, RJ, and take somebody else out of the lineup, I feel like that's a solid message, right? Like, that's something that you can actually do and kind of hold up to other guys on this team and be like, look, you play the right way, you'll get in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you need more of those kind of guys. I mean, John Hayden was a big part of the great culture that they had in Coachella Valley. And that was a really hardworking culture. It was the kind of thing that we wanted the Kraken to import from CV to Seattle, and what we were kind of hoping Dan Bilesma would be able to do. And so, you bring a few more players that were really integral parts of that up to Seattle. I feel like it can't hurt, at least.
No, certainly not, right? Like, you just lost 6-2 to the Blue Jackets. You've been struggling at home, on the road. You've been struggling against all levels of teams. Yeah, no, it cannot hurt at this point, but it is an interesting kind of situation for them. I don't know. Like I said, I sit Berkey, sit Chandler Stevenson, sit whoever, just do something.
At this point,
it's not even on the coaching staff to do something. I just want the team to respond to something.
Yeah, and I mean, I really don't care who comes out for Hayden, right? As long as it's not like one of the Beniers.
Don't take like Capo Caco out.
Yeah, don't play but there are plenty of players that are not playing up to expectations that you could do, and so at that point, I don't care who it is. Yeah. Super chat here from Casey. Happy wedding, RJ. You guys are great at what you do. Thanks for doing it. Thank you, Casey. And we do love doing it, even after games like this. We really do. And then I see a couple chats here. Do you want to go Zame or Lindsay first, Dylan?
Let's do Lindsay first.
Let's go Lindsay first. RJ's honeymoon kicks off with back-to-back midday Kraken hockey Oh, poor Kat. I know it is a little tough, but I do want to. I don't know if she's still watching here. She's actually at the venue, kind of helping set up and everything, I believe, right now. But I just do want to thank my wonderful fiance Kat for being as supportive as she has been. I mean, really through all of this, even the move to Seattle, which was actually kind of her idea to go for it and everything. I couldn't and would not be doing this without her. So thank you, Kat, if you're watching this, or if you're not. I just thank you so much. And thank you, Casey, for the super chat. Thank you, Lindsay, for pointing out the rough. We really did wedge it right in there, yeah. And well,
they were trying to thread a needle, and they did.
Yeah, we sure did, and drag Dylan into it too, as it happens with all this ECH stuff. And then this one from Zame, just because I love these card games, these card things that Zame does. Our buddy Zame from Davy Jones Locker Room. 2 things. Congratulations, RJ. Also, draw 2 cards from a deck, and if they are an ace and a king of the same suit, Kraken are in the playoffs. All right. So Zame has been putting the Kraken's playoff odds into various, playing card combinations. It's not looking good.
No, I was going to say that somehow makes it sound worse than like, oh, they're at 2%.
Yeah, it does.
Somehow
it really
that
does.
sounds worse than 2%. It is brutal. Oh, why is Chuck Fletcher being brought up in the?
Because there was a question about.
I know we're only a half an hour in.
Yeah, there was a question from Kylie. If Francis gets fired, how does that rank for shortest GM stint? And then Teddy bringing up Chuck Fletcher, was GM for 19 months, so that's why it was brought up there.
Yeah, no, there have definitely been shorter stints than that in the National Hockey League.
In fact, Francis is in the top 10 in the league as far as longest tenure GMs right now that are active. I know he took the job kind of before he had the chance to really do anything, a couple of years before the Kraken really started playing, but still, even if you put it to the point where at the expansion draft, if you start it there, he's still in the top half of the league as far as longest tenure GM. So it's not like he's had a really short tenure or anything, right? He's had the amount of time that most GMs have, at least.
No, and I think 4 years is a really good sample size. Like, that is enough time for a general manager in a traditional setting to join a team, kind of to inherit a roster, inherit a prospect pool, kind of inherit the cap situation from somebody else, and then remake the team in their image, right? It's not something that can always happen overnight. It is something that takes a couple of years. Really, they can institute a plan. Maybe they go through 2 coaches during that 4-year stint as well, right? They get a coaching change in there on top of things. I really do feel like 4 years is an appropriate amount of time to judge a general manager, RJ. And then with this situation, you've got 4 seasons starting from scratch, where it's not even like Ron Francis had to come in and inherit like a bad team and a messy cap situation. And it was going to take him 1, 2, maybe even 3 years to truly be able to have some turnover on this roster. He just got to pick and choose what he wanted it to be. And it's just that, unfortunately, the result of that has been this, which is a team that is currently in line to pick 5th overall in the draft.
Exactly. Francis had really as much freedom as any GM has had in the salary cap era, aside from maybe George McPhee in Vegas, right? Those are the 2 situations where they've had all the freedom, completely blank slate. And, for better or worse, this is what he's done with it. Also cool to see Kat is in here. So glad you're watching there, Kat. And yeah, we did manage to fit the honeymoon of the 4 Nations break. But I do want to get to this from Michael, though. Kraken transplant in SoCal here. Just stopping in to ask you to keep us all in your thoughts and prayers. The situation down here is apocalyptic. Whole city is gone. Absolutely. And, Dylan and I both originally from Southern California. And so we know a lot of people that are in that area affected by it. I know, Dylan, you were even checking earlier today there was a new fire that popped up over near where you live. And so it's, where you grew up and where your parents live. So it's a rough situation for everybody. I hope everyone, is okay. And it's just awful out there right now.
Yeah, I know it's really bad, the whole situation. And I spent the whole first period communicating with my parents as they were trying to figure out what things kind of needed to be taken out of the house as they were under an evacuation order. So it is one of the realities of living in SoCal. It's been getting worse, definitely not better. I mean, it's like the 3rd major time in the last 5 years. That Palisades fire, though, definitely the worst of any of the ones that have gone through in the last half decade. And it's just been devastating. Several friends and family that lost homes during this one. It's been horrible to see. And it's certainly not when I think of California and home and all of that kind of stuff. It is really tough.
Definitely. And it kind of puts it all in perspective, right? As we, we're talking about the Kraken game and how bad it is, right? There's some very real things going on
definitely worse things
in life. That's for sure. So yeah, the thoughts with everybody, affected in SoCal and Michael there and your sister there, Lindsay, who had to evacuate as well. So it's, hope that's able to get better soon. The crazy winds, like my brother was talking about today, because he's up for the wedding, and he was saying that he's never experienced that before, where he got woken up in the middle of the night because the house was shaking. It felt like an earthquake, but it was because of the winds.
Over 100-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, one family friend of ours, their house was damaged not by fire, but because 2 trees fell into it because of the winds. Power lines are down all over the place. That's creating dangerous situations, and potentially in some cases the fires themselves. And it's also crazy because so much of this is also in part because we finally got rain this year.
Yeah.
So we had the atmospheric storm. It dumped a bunch of rain. Vegetation grew like crazy in a way that it hadn't in a really long time. And then it got super dry. All that new vegetation dried out, and it just became all of this fuel that's been going like crazy right now. I mean, it's just the situation kind of developing the way that it did. Their inability to use the helicopters and the airplanes last night for the Palisades fire because of the high winds, so they weren't able to do any airdrops, is really why it kind of got so out of control. It's everything that could go wrong has been going wrong to just create a truly awful scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of look back in chat, kind of try and get back on the hockey thing here, I do want to point this out from Teddy. As someone who's been anti-Grew for a long time, I'll say that one was just not on him at all. Completely agreed with that, and I think it at least just should be addressed, right? In case anybody thought, because he did get yanked from this game, in case anybody thought, not that I think a lot of you really thought this, right? That it was his fault. It certainly wasn't. That was a mercy pull. And he's been playing pretty well recently too. I mean, if you had told me, back around the San Jose game, right, that they'd actually be getting this level of play from Grubauer, I think, okay, they could really get themselves back into the playoff hunt. But unfortunately, he's not getting really any help from in front of him.
No, I mean, it's nuts because this feels like the worst defensive performance that we've really seen from the team all year, or at least in that short, like that kind of stretch in the second period. Like that was the worst sequence from a TV timeout to a TV timeout.
Yeah.
It really felt like the worst defense that we'd seen from this team. And of course it happens with Grew and net. It's just, I just don't know what else that poor guy's got to do, just because he's gonna have like a 5-12-1 record, 5-11-1 record now, and it's just it's absolutely brutal. And Jenna saying Bausma said he did it to send a message. He had to. I'm kind of surprised he waited as long as he did. I feel like if Joey wasn't just coming back off of IR, we probably see that after the 3rd or 4th goal, just because I feel like that's when he again needed to send more of a message and kind of get in there.
I think so too. And I don't know for sure, but I felt a little hesitation. It felt like from the coaching staff, right? You don't want to throw, especially the way the team was playing. You don't want to throw Joey fresh off of injury behind that. So I understand not wanting to do that in the situation, but at a certain point they felt like they had to. And they really did. I mean, they didn't allow, Decord didn't allow a goal in the whole game, right? It was just the empty netter that went in after that. So it did, I guess, seem to spark the guys a little bit, but I mean, too little, too late at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I just, like I said, it feels like no matter what levers you pull, you can maybe even it out, but you can't seem to get this group going. Like, you know what I mean?
And I'm checking to see if if anyone's kind of posted any post-game reaction or anything from, with quotes or whatever on social media. I'm curious if anyone had anything really to say. I know the last couple home games, right? There wasn't much. I don't see, I mean, McCann is from Davy Jones' locker room, McCann on the defensive stuff. I don't know. Trust me, I wish I could figure it out. We're going to come together here as a team and try to talk about it.
See, that's brutal for me, because that's where
we were last season. We're kind of back to last season at that point, right?
And they're just trying to kind of say that stuff, right? At least this year, the players have been able to say what the issue was, right? So you had some level of, okay, the coaching staff's talking about it. They've identified it. They're communicating that to the players. The players have identified it. In theory, then it should be, addressable. It should be something that can get fixed. If we're going to get back into the territory of we know that these are the issues and we just can't seem to solve them. And so we just don't have answers anymore. Again, that feels to me like the worst place you can be as a team, as a locker room, is just not knowing what else you can do and what levers to pull there. That is tough stuff to see.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of where we were at the end of last season, and why even I wasn't sure about, do you need to get rid of Hackstall or not? And that's kind of what solidified my thoughts on that. I don't know. It's with 40 games to go though. How are you there with 40 games to go?
I know.
So I don't want to get too doom and gloom, but I'm just starting to think about it. Like, I don't know. How do you finish the season like that?
Right. Again, it feels like you have more of a coaching staff that's able to identify things and start talking about them and kind of going through those motions. I guess it would be, we'll see what he says or what guys say come, post morning skate in a couple days, right? Post that next game. If we see the defense look better from everybody, if this was just this is the first game of the road trip and it was bad enough that it's going to kick us into gear and we're just not going to come out and play that way again. I would love for that to be the case. I think there's the potential for that to be the case, especially with these next couple games you've got coming up. But this team, I can't give them the benefit of the doubt anymore that it will be.
Right. I can't either at this point. And I see Andrew asking, is because McCann gave that quote, is McCann trade off the books? And Teddy, I wouldn't want Ron to trade him. I will say Jared McCann is not the problem at all. Like as much as there are problems all over the place with this team, McCann is not the problem. I know he hasn't been producing in the way that we've wanted or that he's wanted, right? I think a lot of that is being put on the line that he was, but he was actually moved off that line this game. And I think it is worth talking about, right? He was put on a line with Shane Wright. And I thought that line was excellent in this game. They were the only line that had a +1 really in this game, right? There's three guys. It was Wright, Tolvin, and McCann. Two of those guys with Wright and McCann, a +1 in this game. They did their job. He did his job. McCann, had a really close chance on another one as well. He had a breakaway. He wasn't unfortunately able to put that one in, but I thought McCann had a good game, especially being freed from that line. Yes. I thought he looked a lot better.
Yeah, no, he definitely looked a lot better. I'm excited to potentially see him away from Chandler Stevenson for a little while. Hopefully that gets him going again. And I know the idea, right? There's people talking about the idea of the trade with him. I probably wouldn't lean that way. I understand some of the logic there in the sense that he is probably your most valuable asset. If you are going to have to kind of go through a couple year rebuilding process, you could certainly use what you could get back from a Jared McCann trade. But also Jared McCann, he's not that old yet. I feel like, obviously his contract's fantastic and he really does feel like somebody that you're probably going to be able to sign to an extension once this current contract is up for reasonable money, right? And I also do think that he is capable of being a positive locker room influence. And I do think that he has been one of the few consistent guys with this core group that hasn't, taken games off or really come out and said stuff like, I don't know too much, or at least you feel like it affects him more, maybe, right? That was one of the things we talked about late last season. I think he would be a good mentor to have with younger players coming in. So I do I get the idea of maybe wanting to move your biggest asset if you're really going to rebuild, but I think he brings more valuable tools to a rebuilding team than just another first round pick.
Exactly. And we saw just the words written down on social media, right? We didn't see his actual face or reaction to that, but I would bet you that he looked as upset as anybody on that team to have lost that way. He hates to lose more than anybody else on this team. And he is part of the guys who are pushing in the right direction that are too few in that room, but he is one of those guys. And then, Jenna Canner wants to be in Seattle. I feel like, certainly the impression that I've got, the fact that he was willing to sign there, he was really the first Kraken player to really sign an extension there to re-up, and I think that would continue to go forward even when his current deal is done. Obviously he'd be due for a raise, but I think you could still get him for probably a reasonable number, and he's one of those guys I'd want in the room as you're trying to kind of rebuild the culture.
Right. And if you are, if you are going to need to reshuffle things, you do need to reshuffle things with this core group. Things do need to change. There needs to be roster overhaul here. Like I said, he is just not one of the guys that feels like he needs to be overhauled.
Exactly.
Right. I get that he's struggling this year, but he's played a lot with Chandler Stevenson. He does not scream to me as one of the guys that is part of the problem, but I think he is one of the guys that could definitely be part of a solution.
Exactly. So as we kind of approach the 50-minute mark here, I kind of want to do a last call in chat. I know there was a lot of early stuff that we kind of had to skip over, just because of the big topics that we were covering and everything, and all the super chats. Thank you again to everyone, by the way, who gave a super chat. And as I speak about that, we have another super chat here. But throw anything else you have in chat now, and we'll get to it. So big super chat here from Kitty B Kraken. Not a fan of Edzo. I, for one, would rather hear play-by-play and actual color about the game. The Kraken playing poorly. He's bored with the game. Maybe he Maybe he could even let JT get a word in edgewise once in a while. Okay to hate me for that. I know that might not be the most popular opinion there.
Jenna's saying hot take.
Yeah, hot take there from Jenna. I mean, Edzo, look, I mean, I think when you're as perceptive as he is, and you see all the little things and all the breakdowns, it can be, I mean, look, it's kind of maddening for us at a certain point, right? I think that's certainly, right, for him as somebody, especially who used to play the game, and you kind of feel helpless, as you mentioned, I think on past post games,
coached and everything,
and is coached, right? When you can't do anything about it because you're stuck up in the booth, and you can't get out on the ice. And then terrible. I go back and forth about Edzo. But yeah, I mean, I've heard kind of takes on both sides of it. We saw even earlier in the chat people saying, he's kind of one of the things that makes the game still watchable, just kind of providing that color there. But I see we have some more takes on Edzo here.
Yeah, he was just pissed off at what he's seen from Ricky, Jeremy. I think it frustrates Edzo for them not to. Where to go?
Not do basic stuff. Sorry, that was my bad.
Yeah. And it is one of those, like, I do think there's a large portion of it where it is just really tough right now if you're going to be somebody who has to talk about this team on really a nightly basis, right? Whether it's you're part of the true broadcast, you look at the intermission panels and the pre and post game that the Kraken Hockey Network does. We certainly feel it on our end doing the post games, because this year especially has felt very Groundhog Day like, right? In the sense that it is the same, like, 3 issues that we talk about on a nightly basis over and over again. And when they're not being addressed, when they're not being improved upon, right? Again, it's one thing if it's, okay, the team is bad, these are the issues, but they're slowly getting better. And after 40 games, we're at a point where we feel decent about it. We're 40 games in and we're seeing the same stuff that we were seeing opening day against St. Louis that is a problem for this team, and it's not changing. And when you have to find a way to make that analysis feel fresh, when you're saying that people need to get to the net front for the 42nd game in a row, it's really hard to, one, come up with words that don't sound like you're just repeating yourself, and also kind of get yourself into that mindset where you're going to do it in a maybe more of a constructive way, right? Like, you just, even with these post games, right? Like, we were a lot more like, okay, these are things that they can do. Here's how you would do it. Here's the whiteboard. Let's break it down. And now we're just like, you just got to go to the net, bud. Like, there's nothing else I can say here, right? And I think there's an element of that with everybody that's kind of in this situation where you're talking about the team kind of game by game, when so many of these games just look and feel exactly the same. And it's the same issues over and over. And you're listening to the coaching staff during the second intermissions talk about those same issues night in and night out. And you're talking to the players at media scrums during practice, post-game, pre-game, during the player interviews, during the first intermission, after a morning skate, and they're saying the same things over and over. When all of that has been said over and over for 42 games in a row, it just wears on you, and it wears on you in a way that I did not know it was going to wear on me. And I can't imagine somebody in Edzo's shoes, what it must feel like for him.
Yeah, exactly. We feel a little bit of that, but yeah, I mean, you didn't enjoy the discussion on the different shades of green from Edward. I mean, we've been named a couple greens as they were going, because why the heck not, right? So there is that stuff, and I will say this one from Autocat though. I want to read. I think I like Edzo and his friendship with Forsland. Their banter is funny, but I definitely don't like when he's interrupting JT, and I think that might be an issue that the Kitty B Kraken has with that as well, right? Is that, and it's tough just because of the format, because I think you have three guys that all have a lot of good stuff to say. And just the way a broadcast works, it's so hard to have all three of those guys be able to get equal time and say their piece, right? And you do notice it on the games where Edzo isn't there, and you have JT who's able to speak up a little bit more, where he has great insights that he can give. I love JT on a broadcast, but it does feel like he gets a little bit crowded out when they have all three. You know, maybe part of that's Edzo kind of interrupting, but other parts of it is just you have three guys that all, you know, need.
There's a reason we don't see 3-person units in sports regularly. Right. Like this isn't something that like really any sports kind of coverage does, to have a 3-person unit in there for play-by-play and color, right? Because it's just too hard for everybody to kind of have a voice. We would see it, I guess, a little bit in the NHL. And I do think like these are the games where it goes a little bit better, is when you have JT down there between the glass, and it's more of like that perspective. I think back to the NBCSN days, right, where you had Pierre Maguire down there between the glass, and it was more of like a third person that you could go to and be like, okay, what have you been seeing from down there on the ice? And really that person who's between the glass is down there to observe the things that you can only get from ice level, and then you just kind of go to them when you have time and breaks in the broadcast to have them join in. But the NFL does not have 3-person units, right? Monday Night Football on ESPN tried it, and it was a mess, right? Like it is just really hard to have 3 people in there. I think it's great to have a rotation, right? And have different games, do different things, especially when you have people like John and Edzo that are doing national broadcasts as well. It really does help to have somebody as strong as JT to be there for the nights that Edzo can't be. But I think that there is a reason that sports traditionally does not have 3-person broadcasts, and that's what we kind of see on nights like tonight.
Yeah, well said. Now, before I get to the other big conversation people were kind of having about prospects to call up and the cup of coffee thing, I do want to read this from Draybert. This loss was karma for that one Skibidi Kraken Twitter tweet. I'm
fine with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. And you know what? If we're going to chalk it up to that, I'm okay with it. Maybe I'm just too old and I don't get it, but I was not a fan of all of that. So personally. Yeah. But anyway, there was a larger conversation that was kind of going on about, which prospects do you maybe call up later on and kind of, give cups of coffee to and give a few games at the NHL level, if anybody. And I know, Dylan, you're kind of the big prospects guy. And, there's positives. I think it's good to get some of those guys some game reps. But, Viren says, I will say I'm not in favor of screwing with prospect development just for the sake of novelty. And so you kind of have to strike that balance, right? Where you want it to be something where you bring in a new aspect to the team, you bring in some young guys who are hungry, but you also want it to be good for their development as well. And so I'm curious your take, Dylan, about, which guys, you think it could benefit them, even if it is a month or two from now. We got a lot of time. We got a lot of season left for some of those guys to maybe get a shot, even just for a few games.
Right. I was trying to pull up the Firebirds roster and kind of and sort it by stats and just kind of see how everybody's doing. I know Yanni Newman has been on fire as of late and has kind of been, looking like somebody that could push to be a call-up candidate. As a whole, I think that part of it is, you have to strike the balance of wanting to reward the young players that are playing well and that are going to be part of the future, get them into NHL action, let them get that cup of coffee, let them see the speed at which the game is played, let them see the physicality that only the NHL has, unlike any other league in the world, versus, we talk about it, right? Last year, maybe this is a locker room that doesn't really totally know what it's doing, or they're not listening to their coach or whatever. And you don't want to introduce that into a young player's game. You don't want them to think that that's how you go about being an NHL pro, if that's what's going on here. So I do think you do have to be careful of that side of things with everything. I got to think, though, having Dan Bylsma be the coach and having other Firebirds on the team in, Shane Wright, Ty Cartier, and all those guys, I got to think that if you brought a Firebird up, they would be able to be insulated with those other guys, and they'd be able to communicate with the coach that they already know and respect and trust, who has helped them on their development path. So I do think there's a little bit less risk than there would be in other situations, or maybe that there would have been last year. I was looking in the at least on the mobile site, the Firebirds roster and stats page seems a little wrong for certain things, such as Daniel Sprong's stat line there.
Wow, he's put up 27 points already with the Firebirds. Yeah, that's impressive.
That doesn't feel right, so I'm not gonna necessarily trust the numbers on that page. But But I do think that, yeah, Yanni Newman has been on fire as of late. I do think that at some point you're going to want to put Yanni Newman in the NHL just to experience things in a less pressure-filled environment, because he has such a large learning curve from a skating perspective, and the speed that he's going to have to kind of deal with and adjust to in the NHL. And so I do think that more games for a guy like Yanni Newman are valuable, just so that he can kind of learn those things and then spend an off season working with maybe a skating coach, working with the coaching staff for the Seattle Kraken, and think about, okay, I noticed like this stuff was what I was really struggling with at that next level. How can I address that? How can I work on that so that come training camp, I can push for a full-time spot, because I'll be able to hang in that way up there. I feel like that's something that you could certainly do with a Yanni Newman. Jagger Firkus, you can do it and just kind of see how it goes. Like, again, he's just small, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, hey, can you work with me and put on 40 pounds, right? Like, you can't really do that with him. The way Yanni Newman's kind of weakness is something that can be addressed and coached, and you can kind of really use those reps for. So I don't know about that, but certainly you could start, you could bring back up a Ryan Winterton. You can give Ryan Winterton reps in the top six.
That's the name that I was thinking of right away, because I mean, he's got familiarity with Dan. Yep. He's on the older side compared to some of these other guys.
Right? With Shane Wright.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got and you can play him like in a top six role, yep. Right? Let him do what he's been doing in Coachella Valley. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's all good. So I think those would be the two, Yanni Newman or Ryan Winterton for me.
Yeah. So that's what I think. I mean, how about, I guess you said Jagger Firkus, you kind of see how it goes. There really aren't any, I mean, Logan Morrison, I think his development's kind of tailed off a little bit.
Yeah.
Leighton Road, I might like to see for a game or two, the speed that he brings, he probably doesn't have a big long-term future,
No, but he could be like a replacement for a Brandon Tanev, right? You have him and Ty Cartier on a fourth line. They're going to have energy, right? Like you're going to get a consistent energy output from them on a nightly basis.
Yeah. And then Duthan asking about Ty Nelson, and we haven't really talked about defensemen yet.
Yeah.
A little early for Ty Nelson.
I think it is early for Ty Nelson. I think Ty Nelson just needs more time. Defensemen in general need more time, and I think that's just where he's at.
But I will lobby for Ville Otavainen. I'd love to see him get a few games. I mean, you already have. Look, Josh Mahura has been good. Like, I like, rewarding him or whatever, but like, if you have to scratch him for a few games, give Otavainen a look, you're not hurting yourself at all. Right. I mean, that's fine. So I would do that as well. Just, I want to see what he can do at the NHL level. So that's the other name I'd kind of throw out there. So we do have a super chat, big one here from Kitty B Kraken. Thanks for waiting for the prospect discussion there, but happy wedding day tomorrow, RJ and Kat. Maybe that will turn the Kraken season around. Nothing else really has so far. Maybe that's what it needs, right? I just need to get married, and we are writing our own vows. I think I'll not put in, we'll not try and put in the vows that we, vow to do everything.
Reverse jinx on the Kraken.
Yeah, exactly. I think we'll just leave the Kraken out of it. That's probably for the best. But especially since the Kraken are surrounding everything around this wedding. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe that'll turn the mojo around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Good night, Pablo.
Yeah,
there, by the way. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. We're going to learn a lot about the organization, and really also maybe not directly who's going to be calling the shots, but certainly the way the organization is going to view the future, especially post Bonderman's passing.
Yeah,
right. Like, because we haven't seen an off season without him kind of helping lead the way from that ownership perspective. But I think, based on the moves that we see down the road here for the rest of this season, we're going to get maybe our first ideas of what the upcoming offseason could look like for this team if they start really bringing in young guys and stuff like that. That could be a big signal as to what they expect next year to be. If it is they just do the bare minimum sell off and they really stick with Chandler Stevenson getting 19 minutes a night, and they just keep shuffling lines around him to see who they can get to get going with him, that maybe signals that, okay, they are going to commit to this core, and they're going to try to run it back next year and hope that maybe minor adjustments make it the difference. It's going to be really interesting. I still think we're a little too early to see any of it, because again, 40 games left if you're the Kraken, that seems a little early to start being like, what's our next phase as a whole organization?
You almost never see teams
Never
really
see
make the
that.
call
No.
this early in the season, as much as the players are kind of begging the
Yes.
team to, right?
Yes.
So I think it'll be a little while. I think we'll have to wait. I think it all will still be roughly status quo for the game in a
Yes.
couple days against Buffalo.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
having
like-
to remember.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's going to be interesting, but I just don't think we're there yet.
Yeah. So, but in the meantime, you know, we'll hang on with this team. We'll, you know, as Cervellota says, you know, with for the wedding officiant, or you know, or where was it? No, B, in sickness and in health, in Kraken wins and in Kraken losses, we will come here and we will.
More like the commitment we've made.
I know, seriously. And this season, oh my gosh, in sickness and in
Yes,
health,
yes.
in Kraken wins and Kraken losses. That's the vows here to each other. We will come. We will enjoy a post game live with all of you as we have enjoyed it tonight, and we will see you all in a couple nights after the game against Buffalo. Night, everybody.